So we got a nice law-abiding 808 here, but we want to make it commit some crime. Yo, I'm Outlet. And today, you're gonna learn how to compress like a pro. Yesterday, I lost over an hour of footage, so needless to say, the Illuminati does not want you to know this information. A compressor is a tool which reduces the dynamic range of an audio clip. In essence, it tames the loud part of a sound so that you don't need to go in manually and decrease the volume of certain parts. Public service announcement. It's important to mix with your ears, not your eyes. Every single sound on planet Earth, Venus, Mars, the International Space Station is unique in its own way. So there's no silver bullet settings for a compressor. You just need to know how one works to use one properly. So we have a fruity limiter here. This is my go-to compressor inside of FL Studio because of all the visual aids it has. So let's go to the bottom here and switch over to our compressor tab. Now, before we use a compressor, it's important that we know how one works. We have a few key knobs here. We have the threshold, we have the ratio, we have the attack, and we have the release. The threshold here tells the compressor what level it needs to start working. If you think you're compressing, but you can't really hear a difference, chances are this just isn't low enough. The higher the ratio is, the harder the compressor is working. If I set the ratio to 4:1, what that means is that for every 1 decibel of gain above the threshold, it will fit 4 decibels of gain inside of it. So in layman's terms, the higher the ratio, the more squeechy. Let's jump over to our envelope controls here. First, we have our attack. The attack tells the compressor how fast it needs to start working. The higher the attack, the slower it starts working. The release is more or less the opposite. It tells the compressor how long it needs to work after the signal has stopped touching the threshold. And then we got the gain knob. What does the gain knob do, you may ask? The more gain, the more louder. When you compress, it takes the peaks of the volume down, so in turn you're gonna need some gain to boost it back up again to a reasonable volume. Now I got a couple examples for you today. First of which is a vocal sample. Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management. In the beginning and end, it's rather quiet, and in the center, we got quite a loud signal here, so we're gonna use compression to fix that. With the threshold here, I like to start around -30 decibels. I find that it's a good starting point, which isn't too intense, but I can definitely hear what's going on. With this example, I'm gonna start with a 4:1 ratio. I'm also gonna turn the input gain up a little bit here because it is gonna be a lot quieter. Here's before. Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management. And after. Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management. So quite a lot more squished there. So as you can see here, the loud parts got a lot quieter, quiet enough to where I had to compensate with a good 10.6 decibels in input gain just to reach a similar volume. It sounds a lot fuller now as well. Before we move on, take a look at the left side of the fruity limiter. We've got a few controls over here. This purple button here toggles the input peaks, and what that means is all of the audio that's coming into the plugin before any effects are applied. If I were to turn this off, this big purple monstrosity disappears. The green part is the output peaks, so what your audio signal looks like after you've applied all the effects to it with the plugin. This handy little white squiggle shows you how your compressor is working. As you can see, where the loud parts of the signal are, there's a lot of these big peaks, and on the quieter parts, not so much. So a lot of times when people adjust the attack of their compressor, they're trying to let a transient through. The transient is the first 50 or so milliseconds of any audio sample. So for a kick or snare, it's the transient that really makes it punch. So when people are compressing a snare, for instance, they want that transient to come through. When you're mixing vocals, it's less common to see higher attack times on compressors because they want it to have more of a smooth, buttery sound. But for all intents and purposes here, as I raise the attack, you can see there's more and more peaks in the audio. Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management. versus with no attack.
Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management.
These two are the same sections right here and right here. The only difference is that your compressor is working faster. I'm gonna start with around 120 milliseconds on my release time and slowly drag it up to show you how it affects the compressor. Pay attention to these white lines on top.
Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management. Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management.
This compressor goes all the way up to 2 seconds. So if you boost this knob all the way, the compressor is going to be working for 2 full seconds at that intensity, even after no sound is touching the threshold. Jumping over to our second example here, we've got a pop style snare. It's got a lot of body in it, but what I want to do is I want to increase the volume of that transient to give it more of a snap. You know what I'm saying? See, drum samples are a little bit more temperamental than vocals, so you kind of got to put them in their place a little bit. I'm going to be using a 6-to-1 ratio to start here, with my attack at around 40 milliseconds. Now listen to the magic happen as we decrease that threshold. It's got much more of a snap to it. So we got a nice law-abiding 808 here, but we want to make it commit some crime. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a compressor on it with the exact same settings as the pop snare. 6-to-1 ratio, about a 40 millisecond attack, 120 millisecond release time, and we're going to take that threshold down to about 16 decibels and have about 4 or 5 decibels of gain compensation. Oh buddy, that 808 definitely commits credit card fraud in its spare time. The last thing I want to talk about here is over-compression. Yes, you can have too much of a good thing, it is true. So let's go back over to our vocal sample here, and we're going to compress it harder than your gut when a fly shoddy walks by. We got negative 45 decibels on the threshold, a 20-to-1 ratio, the release is a little low at 66 milliseconds, and we have a whopping 18.1 plus 12.8 decibels of gain compensation. What is that, like 30 something?
Compression is the art of making things closer in volume through peak management.
So the telltale sign of overcompression is the noise around the vocal gets boosted up so much that it has this like breathing effect. One really good way to tell that this audio clip is overcompressed is we can listen to the loud portion transitioning into the quiet portion. Around where this breath is, we're gonna hear an extremely large boost in the perceived gain.
Volume.
The
Volume.